So how good is the Model 3's autopilot system on our A roads here in the UK? How does it handle roundabouts? Will it overtake a parked car? And how does it work in the rain? Well, in today's video, I wanted to demonstrate using the free autopilot in my Tesla Model 3 while I commuted between home and work, and show just how good and bad this thing is. Also, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a like on this video, as it really does help me out. So the first thing that we need to do is obviously switch autopilot on. Now pressing once down on the right hand stalk will enable cruise control, and pressing twice on the right hand stalk will enable autopilot. So we'll enable that now. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out first of all was to do with the speed limit while you're using autopilot. So the car doesn't read road signs, so it's not using the cameras to see what the road sign is, it's using the GPS or the maps. So you can see here we're leaving the 30 limit and we're moving into the 40. Now the car knows we've moved into that 40 because the little icon on the right hand side in red has changed to 40, but the cruise control or the autopilot isn't updating, so it's sticking to that 30-mile-an-hour limit until you press the actual icon. So if I press the 40 icon here on the right hand side, it then updates the autopilot and then will move up to 40 miles an hour. Now this seems really temperamental. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So as you would expect on our A roads, we do actually have quite a few sharp bends, and I want to see how the car would handle that. So there's a bend coming up here. The car knows there's either an obstacle in front or a bend because it starts to slow down before I apply the brakes. But as it approaches the bend, it does slow down just enough, but then it actually requests me to take over, and autopilot disengages. So you can see here I've had to take control of the steering wheel to do that final step. Now I actually prefer using autopilot when there's another car in front, because I feel when you're following another vehicle, your car is obviously matching their speed, and it's keeping a safe distance as well. So if they are slowing down for an obstacle or for a bend, then you know you will slow down in enough time, whereas when there's nothing in front, you're relying purely on your car and the autopilot to slow down in enough time to get round that bend. And there are a couple of bends around my area where I just disable autopilot completely, because every time I get near, it's just going far too fast, and I know I would not go around the bend as quickly as the car thinks it can do. And that moves on to the roundabouts next. So you can see here, this roundabout obviously is littered with cones at the moment as it's being worked on, but you can see as we approach the roundabout, the car doesn't quite know where to go, so I've had to take over. I'm not sure if the car would have handled the roundabout, I'm not too sure. Obviously I'm not able to navigate on autopilot, so it wouldn't have necessarily have taken the junction that I needed it to take, but I'm not confident enough that it would have actually have handled the roundabout itself before I needed to take over. And one of the things you'll notice as well is about every 10 to 15 seconds you do need to keep handling the steering wheel. So it will remind you, place your hand on the steering wheel, apply pressure to the steering wheel, and usually it's just a case of just kind of flicking the steering wheel very, very lightly, just so it knows you're still there and you're still in control. Now I'm always aware, just because I'm using autopilot, it doesn't mean that my eyes are off the road and I'm not paying attention. I'm always watching the road. I'll be honest, when you're using autopilot, you're even more focused than you would be as if you were driving it yourself, just because you're making sure the car is definitely handling the road as it should be. And later on in the video you'll see where it does make a few errors, and I've had to grab the steering wheel to ensure that it wasn't going to take an incorrect route or off the road, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so coming up here we've got a dual carriageway. Now I would assume as we approach the dual carriageway, obviously first of all the speed limit changes, so the car should auto update that speed limit to go from the 40 to the 60 to the 70, and it should probably take the left hand lane, you would think, but as you can see as we approach it, the car isn't quite sure where to go, and it just naturally goes to the right hand lane, and the speed limit hasn't updated either, even though the car knows that we are now in a national speed limit area. So I pull the car over and obviously enable, by tapping the icon, enable the correct speed limit. So here we are, we're exiting the dual carriageway now, coming back into a single carriageway, and we're also going from a 70 to a 40, and as you can see here, the car once again knows we've gone into a 40, but if you actually look here, it clearly shows, although there's a 40 here on the right hand side, the cruise control on the autopilot is still set at 70, so if the car in front wasn't there, there's a good chance that the Model 3 would have just continued on at 70 miles an hour through this 40, even though it knows what the speed limit is. So I've not tested this because every situation I've been in there's always been a car in front of me, but would the car have accelerated to 70, or would it have maxed out at the 40? If you know the answer to this, pop it in the comments below. Now where I really feel like the autopilot comes alive is in stop-start traffic. So you can see here we're coming up to some traffic, And usually, obviously, if you were in a manual car, you would be applying the clutch and you would be trying to follow the car in front at a safe distance. Whereas with the autopilot, there's no need to worry at all. It's just a case of letting the car drive itself. It will stick to the car in front. Obviously, in this case, I'm coming up to a roundabout, so I would need to take over anyway. But if it wasn't for the roundabout, there's no need at all. Okay, so this is a good little test here to see how it would navigate around this traffic light or island in the road here. So you can see it's not quite straight and it's quite narrow as well. So as you go through it normally, you'd be quite careful. So I was aware that the car needs to navigate through this. And I was obviously had my hand very close to the steering wheel just to make sure that if I needed to take over, I was ready to do that. And that's the same with a lot of the time as well. So if there's ever a road where you're not that confident with how the car might handle, like passing a cyclist, for example, or a parked car, it's a case of always having your hand very close to the steering wheel, as opposed to just letting the car drive itself. I think that's maybe just a confidence thing, and that will build over time. But at the moment, it's still kind of a beta thing, and you just want to make sure that it's definitely going to navigate it correctly. And we're obviously entering York City now through stop-start traffic again, and there's no concern. So it's following the car in front at a safe distance, it's navigating bends, it's obviously avoiding the islands, it's sticking to the road as you would expect. So I've got absolutely no concerns at all with using this in city driving as well. So how does it do in the rain? The autopilot uses the cameras obviously to navigate the roads. So if the cameras are obscured or blocked, then you will get a warning on the screen telling you which camera needs to be cleaned. But provided they're all clean and you haven't got any error messages, it will be absolutely fine in the rain. Now, it's raining here, so I thought I'd demonstrate it being used during the rain. It's raining a lot heavier than what the camera's picking up. So at the time of recording, I thought this would be a really good test to show you in heavy rain that the autopilot had no concerns at all. But obviously that doesn't pick up quite as easy as I expected. But driving through the rain here, you can clearly see that it is navigated with no issues. Exactly the same way as when it was dry, and also there are no error messages as well to say that the cameras are obscured, and it's still allowing me to enable autopilot. So when it's not safe to enable it, you will get an orange icon where the steering wheel is, and it will say something on the lines of autopilot not available. So this is a good example of having autopilot enabled and the car in front is starting to indicate to pull off. So as soon as the car starts to slow down in front, the autopilot obviously monitors that and it slows down to keep a safe distance. So once that car has then left, the autopilot then kicks in and will allow you to obviously continue on at the normal, the speed limit of the road. And if you look on the screen as well, you can quite clearly see that the van that was just pulling out in front is also being picked up by the cameras as well. So should that van had slowed down and actually blocked the road, then the autopilot would have come to a complete halt as well. Now this was a really interesting moment during this test. It's not something I've ever experienced before either. As I'm approaching the village of Wilberforce, there's a slip road on the left-hand side. Now, it's all clearly marked. There's no reason that you would use that road. But as I approach it, the car, for some reason, thinks that that's the road that I need to be on, and it just swerves left. Now, obviously, I had my hands near the steering wheel, so I was able to take control again. But the fact is, we're on an A road. We're doing, 50 miles an hour, and the car, for some reason, decided just to pull left and try to take that slip road. But once again, that really demonstrates why you need to have your hands near or on the steering wheel and why you need to be paying attention. So you couldn't have been allowing the car to drive then while you were, checking your phone or looking out the window or playing on the dashboard. You need to be aware because the car could just take a sudden turn without you expecting. Then entering this final dual carriageway on the way home again, you can see that it does take the left-hand lane this time, whereas this morning it took the right-hand lane by mistake. But once again, the speed limit hasn't updated correctly, so you can see that the speed limit is the national speed limit now, going by the icon on the right hand side. However, the autopilot is still sticking to 40, so we just need to tap that icon on the right hand side and it will then adjust back up to the correct speed. And look, another Model 3 owner. And once again, using the autopilot in stop-start traffic is obviously a breeze really. It's just a case of tapping the steering wheel every 15 seconds or so and the car will navigate and keep a safe distance from the car in front as well. And as we approach this roundabout as well, this time I thought I'd let the car go a little bit further. I want to see how far I could push it before autopilot disengaged. And as you can see here, it wasn't going to go any further anyway, so I did have to take over. So the final test that I actually wanted to try out here was what would happen if there was a parked car on the road and you obviously needed to navigate around it. Would the autopilot do that for you, or would you need to take over? So as you can see, there's a parked car up in front. This is the only time today I've been able to do this due to the fact there's always been cars behind me, but the road's empty. I just want to play this out and see what would happen. So we're approaching the car. Autopilot's obviously slowing us down before we get to it. and I kind of waited for a few seconds thinking, will we overtake? And we weren't, so I needed to take control and obviously overtake it myself. So it's unfortunate the car won't overtake parked cars, but that's just something to be aware of as well. And that kind of wraps up this video for today. So as always, thanks for watching, and I hope this video was useful to you. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and follow me on Instagram. Until next time.